Today's talk is going to be a little bit different than the usual talk. So I know in this class we're generally used to just sitting and listening for 45 minutes to the speaker in a fairly passive way, and then maybe having about 5 to 10 minutes of Q&A at the end. The speaker today really wants the conversation to be a lot more organic and to flow back and forth between you all and him much more. So he's going to do a brief reading at the beginning of his talk, or the beginning of our time together. And then he wants you to ask questions. He's really open-ended about what kinds of questions you ask. So he's not expecting that you all have a sustained and deep knowledge of his work, for example, or what it means to be a Lebanese-American gay writer. We really want to bring a conversation into the classroom. So as he's doing the reading, think about things that you might want to ask him about. You can ask him about contemporary arts and literature. You can ask him about LGBTQ politics. You can ask him about difference from cross-cultural understandings about what it means to be queer and trans. So think about ways that you can open this up and that we can make this a really organic conversation together. So I'm thrilled to have Rabih Alameddine with us today. And I will say that the first way that I got to know Rabih was he was on my then boyfriend, now husband's soccer team, gay soccer team in the 1990s. And I knew him as a skilled soccer player, but not as this incredibly accomplished author and artist. And so these many, many years later, I've read all of his books. I love his work. And I'm excited to share him with you all. Alamin Dean is the author of the novels Koolaids, I the Divine, which might be my favorite, I'm not sure, the Hakawati, An Unnecessary Woman, and The Angel of History, which you all read some from and is also an incredible work. He also has a short story collection, The Perv, and he divides his time between San Francisco and Beirut. Let's give him a big Sonoma State welcome.
Hi. Can you all hear me? No? Is it on?
Make sure it's turned on.
Oh no, yeah, it's on.
Maybe closer. Maybe move it just up here.
Life is hard.
It really is.
Is it better now? So thank you for coming. Do they all get A's for coming? You get an A, you get an A, you get an A. So anyway, the reason that I only like to read for a short time is two things. One, I notice that people sort of lose attention after a little bit. And two, I hate reading, so it works both ways. However, if the Q&A does not go forward, I can read other segments. Although it would be bad for you if you'd go from an A to a B+. Anyway, this is from The Angel of History. It's early in the book. All you need to know is that the narrator is basically mourning the loss of his lover who died 20 years ago. The beating of your heart kept me awake one night. For months after you died, I saw you everywhere. Heard your voice, sonorous, throaty, reverberating in my ear. I wasn't crazy. I knew you were dead. I buried you after all. I mean, I burned you, cremated you. But I kept seeing you doing dishes in the kitchen with your back to me. I'd call you as you attacked each plate in our plastic dish rack, but you didn't look back, and then you were gone in a flash, and I was left with nothing, not even an after image. I didn't mistake you for anybody. I never saw you in a crowd thinking someone else was you. No, it was never like that. I saw you in the hallway, in our hallway, under the Turkish lamp you brought back from Istanbul when you were there so long ago. Remember the trouble they gave you at customs for a $25 lamp? And when you emerged from the swinging doors, you were furious. I kept telling you to calm down, but you wouldn't. You went on and on because you were angry and you were an American and you could ruffle feathers at airports. While I was alive, I loved you while you were alive, and I loved you still, but I forgot for a while. Forgive me. I couldn't obsess about you all the time. So you disappeared as if I'd bleached my memory. But you came back, you know, like a fungal infection. Remember thrush, the white stains that attacked your innocent tongue? Looked like the snowy down on old strawberries. We couldn't get rid of it. And you hated it, and I hated it, and you wanted it over. When, to make you feel better, I joked that the furry fungus matched your white lab coat, you turned apoplectic, wanted to strangle me. I still regret that. I thought it was funny at the time. You've been gone for decades. You hid deep in my lakes. Why now? Why infect my dreams now? What flood is this? Once, as I was buying groceries in a store where a young third worlder mopped the floor, back and forth, around a yellow sign that announced piso mojado, the mephitic aroma of disinfectant assaulted my senses, and you jumped the levee of my memory. Proust had his Madeleine, but bleach was all ours, darling, all ours. The tomatoes didn't look too good, and I just went home. I'd been a coward. I was scared. Do notice I said scared and not frightened. You taught me the difference. You said, children get scared. Men might feel afraid, might even feel terror, but men don't get scared. I'd been so lonely since you died. You left me roofless in a downpour. You gripped the bed rail when you took your final breath, and I had to pry open your fingers one by one to free you. It took 17 minutes because my hands were shaking so much. Even in death, you were stronger than I, and more obstinate. The mortician told me it took forever to burn you. Thrice he had to put you in the incinerator. You refused to turn to ash. You sincerely believed that the distance between you and me would one day disappear. You told me I was not my mother and you were not my father, but how could we not be? How could we not be? The stones over her cenotaph still felt so very heavy. You held out your arms and said, join me, but I couldn't. And you said, let me love you, and I couldn't because you wanted to be so close. You held out the fireman's net and said, jump, and I couldn't. I felt the fall was much too great. I chose to go back into the fire. You said, I like it when you doze on my chest, but I said, the hair on your chest irritates my cheeks and makes it difficult to sleep. I could hardly bear the beauty of you. You were gone for so long, and I moved along, and everyone told me I was alive. But that night, in my bed, each time my ear touched a single pillow, I heard your heartbeat once more, once more, once more, once more. My heart is restless until it rests in thee. So, that was pleasant. So that's the first part of the reading. Any questions? Remember, the grade starts going from A. There are many, there wasn't just one step, there were lots of steps. Primarily, at the time that I was painting, I was rather successful. I always joke that I quit at my peak. I had a gallery in New York, I had a gallery in London, I had a gallery here, I had a gallery in Beirut. But I always felt like a fraud. I always thought that There were lots of painters, and I knew them. They were my friends who were much better than I was. I was successful for many reasons, including luck, and that I could put my ideas, I could express them better, but I wasn't that good of a painter. And it was true. So in writing, I only feel like a fraud half the time, which is an improvement. But the truth is, I've been many, many things. My undergrad was in mechanical engineering. I have a master's in I think an MBA in finance and international business or something like that. But when I tested positive in 1986, and my decision at the time was, what would I do, if I had 2 years left? And my decision was to go back to school and get a PhD. That's supposed to be a funny line. So I went back to school. I didn't get my PhD, luckily. But what I'm trying to say is that I went through a whole circuitous thing, going around and around and around. I came back to writing because when I was 4, my father, I remember, asked me what I wanted to do when I grew up, and I said I wanted to write. And at 4, I wanted to write Superman comics and Batman and my hero, Wonder Woman. Anything else? Please.
What was your inspiration for
This story? Inspiration would be a difficult word. I was having a nervous breakdown. No, what happened was 20 years ago, my first book came out, and it caused a bit of an uproar. And it was about AIDS and the Lebanese Civil War. And then I stopped. I stopped writing about the AIDS epidemic, primarily because, like the narrator of my book, I could not deal with it. It's difficult to explain what it was like during those days when everyone you knew, lovers, friends, were just dying one by one, and nobody cared. So by the time 1996, the deaths began to slow down. I shut myself down to be able to move on, and I started writing, different kinds of books. Primarily about being marginalized, but not about the AIDS epidemic. So it was, like a woman in Beirut, a woman over here having trouble being Lebanese, stuff like that. What I noticed about, maybe 4 or 5 years ago, was that I was getting angry at many different things that I thought were unrelated at first. I don't know if you guys remember, but at that time, we had bombing campaigns, primarily through drones, in all these various Arab countries. And nobody seemed to care. And I would read about all these people who kind of looked like me, and their death was not important. So all the sort of anger I felt during the years of AIDS, when we were dying and nobody cared, just kept popping up. And I started seeing friends that I thought were dead 20 years ago. And I would see them. And of course, as the narrator would say, it wasn't true. It's just that I kept seeing them everywhere. And then I realized that it was time. And I sat down, and it was really difficult because it's not an autobiography, but it is emotionally feels the same. So that's why it came back as, the funny thing is that this one came out 20 years after the last one. So is that an inspiration? Please.
You're referring to the narrator of that story.
Mm-hmm.
Is that something based off of your experiences, or something you knew? Or?
No, the narrator it's an old question. The narrator is never me, per se. But usually, I'm not very good at distancing myself from the narrator. So they usually have a lot of things that I have. But no, this is a Yemeni poet. whose lover died. I did not have a lover who died of AIDS. I had many friends, but no lovers. He's, a word processor. But I mean, the funniest thing for me is I've written five novels. The one novel was about a 72-year-old woman who lives alone and dyes her hair blue by accident. Nobody ever asks me if that's autobiographical, even though that is the most autobiographical novel I've ever written. But it's always assumed that, oh, it's a gay boy, that's the one, Whereas no. We hide behind many things. But no, usually, I mean, the other thing that I do that, some writers do is that I usually have the narrators and I the same age, being in the same places at the same time, so that, I can remember, if I'm writing about my father's death, I will remember what the weather was like when my father died, so that when the narrator talks about his father's death, he has something to hold on to. Stuff like that. I usually send them to the same schools I went to. Anything else?
When people ask you questions, can you repeat the questions?
Okay. God, you guys are demanding. Go ahead.
What is the political climate regarding LGBTQ issues in Lebanon?
So what is the political climate regarding LGBT issues in Lebanon? Lebanon has an old law that has been left by the French that is not an anti-LGBT issue, it is an anti-abnormal sex issue. That law has been rescinded because a trans woman sued the state, and she won. That she refused to consider that she was legally a woman, as the state has accepted, so that whatever she does could not be abnormal because it's between a man and a woman. So that was one of the first big blows. But the other one that is just as important is that there are now probably about 4 gay human rights groups in Lebanon. Unfortunately, they never work together. They're always politically infighting, but they've done an incredible job. They've done such an incredible job that for the first time in the 20 years that they've been around, the 25 years, the big religious organizations have started taking notice because they've won many rights. So for the first time in Lebanon, the Muslims, the Shiite, the Sunnis, the Greek Orthodox, the Catholics, the Maronites were all able to get together and hate on the gays, as they call it. So it's a big legal fight, but that's still going on. However, I will tell you that Beirut is probably the gayest city I've ever been in. And openly so. I mean, it's never been. When I was a kid, Beirut was the first place that I saw that had an outdoor gay bar. As in, it's not behind a brick wall. It's just that how we define gays when I was growing up is different than what we do now. Everybody was pretending to be straight. Nobody, everybody. All of us knew that they were gay, but as long as you put up a front, it would have been okay. So that, like when I first came out during the Pleistocene era, I believe, neither my father nor my mother had any trouble with it. But my father particularly just wanted me to get married and have kids like all his friends, and I could fuck whoever I want on the side. And I always joked that I had to come out to my father 3 times because he kept forgetting the poor thing. But in any case, I can still say that in Lebanon is probably still one of the few places where I can get laid. where anybody can get laid. It's not the most ideal place, but it's advanced beyond anything I could imagine. I was one of the earliest, like members of one of the first. This might be interesting. One of the first sort of gay rights groups. But I was living here. I was teaching in Lebanon for a while. So I got involved, and I got involved before I went there, but then really when I went there. And I was so disappointed because they would not do what I told them to. And what was funny is that the minute I left and I said I wanted nothing to do with these people, they actually were able to get together and create a homegrown rights group that changed Lebanon as we know it. The minute me and people like me who were from the outside trying to put our own sort of imprint on how this should go forward, they were able to come up with, seriously, I mean, they have done some things that boggle my mind. I worship at their feet. Anything else? Come on, guys, don't make me read. Do you want to know about dark matter? Did you watch the last Star Trek movie? Yeah. Do you want to know, what was anything about Captain Marvel? You can ask me anything.
What do you think contributes to a healthy display of sexuality in terms of being open and
A healthy display of sexuality. That's fascinating. I love sex. I forgot what it's like, but I do love it, or I used to. Look, I'm like many gay men of my generation. I believe that all sex is healthy between consenting adults. I mean, I jokingly say it's healthy. That doesn't mean that we can't make fun of your sexual proclivities. I mean, come on. Like, if you're into furries, I'm gonna make fun of that, okay? Really. I mean, I will support and defend your right to do it every single time, but you have to allow me to make fun of you. What is healthy? I mean, the trouble I think of is we tend to think of morality as something that is outside of us, as a societal, and I disagree. In Lebanon, we have a saying that, you wear according to what society asks of you, and you eat according to your own taste. Which is not really talking about dressing and eating, although it could be. What you do in your private life is completely up to you and your partner. If that makes you grow, that is healthy. If it doesn't, and there are a lot of sexual activities I think that are bad for you. But as long as you guys agree, it's fine by me. Again, I've never thought about it as what is healthy. Anyway, does that answer your question? Anything else?
So you say that you transitioned from doing physical art to now writing. Do you sense another transition in the next few years? Are you going to transition to making films?
Definitely not films. I think films are lovely entertainment, and I've been asked. And I have quite a few friends who are filmmakers. No, I don't like the medium. I am thinking of doing a play with a wonderful guy And I can talk about it because I love talking about it. It will be about this guy who keeps reincarnated and has been reincarnated for about 4,000 years. And in every lifetime, for 4,000 years, he loses his testicles. And he has had a sort of guardian angel who's gender confused, gender neutral, but who finally has had it. Are you writing this down? You can't write this down. And so when he wakes up in Trump's America and sees that his testicles have gone, she's had it. They have had it, and begins to tell the poor sod what has happened to him for 2,000 years and how he has kept losing his balls in every lifetime, and he is not learning the fucking lesson so that he doesn't lose his testicles again. Which I think is a brilliant, brilliant play. But it might end up as a book. It might, but the reason it's a play is because I met this guy, and he's this really incredible performance. I'm not allowed to say this. I'll say it. I nominated him for a MacArthur, and he fucking won it. And he's just this drag queen, trans whatever, and he's a performer that I've never seen anything like before. We've been friends for so long, and I've watched his transformation, and then finally I decided I need to work with this guy. But films, no. I mean, maybe. Please. Oh, darling. Oh, darling. Honey, I see a psychiatrist 4 times a week. Do you think I've been seeing the same psychiatrist for 20 years. Do you think I have any regrets? Of course I have regrets. I have regrets about everything. It's like there isn't anything I don't have regrets about. At the end of the day, I feel I have been blessed. I am lucky. I make a hell of a living on my writing. I can talk to people, like this. I can fill audiences everywhere. It's very, very lucky. But at the same time, I've lost so many people that if I could go back now and shoot Reagan in the beginning, I would do so without a second hesitation. I would save hundreds of thousands of people who died unnecessarily. Do I have regrets? Of course I have regrets. I grew up in a civil war. I've watched people die. I've watched cultures crumble. What we had was just lost. Of course I have regrets. I've got so many, baby. It's my life.
Can I ask a follow-up question?
Sure.
I only ask you because my mom is a refugee, and this is one of the first times I'm hearing about somebody talk about having to deal with civil war. So I think one of the problems I have is going to talk to people about the same experience and how they receive it. So how do you talk about all of that?
I avoid it in many ways. She said that she comes, her mom is a refugee, and she has trouble talking to people. And how do I talk to people about my experiences to make them understand? I don't. I hate people. Let me go on. I figured out a long time ago that I have nothing to say to people. People will hear me if they want to hear me, and they won't so I write. But what I also do that has helped me, I don't know how much it has helped other people, is I have worked with Syrian refugees for the last 5 years. It doesn't make it easy, but then it reminds me constantly of where I came from and all the suffering that they're going through, and no one pays attention. And let's not talk about the politics of this country. But that is how, for me, how it works. It's not about trying to explain to people what it's like, and it's definitely not trying to talk to Republicans about what it's like. It's about doing it. It's about going to talk to other refugees. It's about putting yourself on the line as opposed to worrying whether somebody understands you or not. And it's just a different way. And if somebody, I mean, I know lots of people who are able to talk about it, like with Syrian refugees. I have a lot of my friends who are excellent at talking about it and raising funds and stuff like. I can't do it because I start screaming at people and I want to hit them. And, you know, it's like, I'm not very good. I do what I do, but then privately, I take that. So I don't know if that's helpful or not. Wait. How old are you again?
I'm 13.
Oh, good.
Why did you start painting, then go into writing instead of just doing writing?
I was too scared and too frightened. I thought that the book that I wanted to write would cause a lot of damage, that it would hurt a lot of people. And so I put it off for a long time. I started painting as a joke, and it took off. But writing, I started trying to write different things for a long time, and I really was writing shitty stuff. Until finally I decided that I would write my first book the way that I wanted it, and I would publish it under a different name. I had many names. My favorite was Nadine Muhammad. You know, have a Western Arabic and a girl's name so that nobody would ever know. But then I had a really good publisher who looked at me and said, "Do you really think that you can see your book and not tell every single person that this is your book?" And I put my name down on it. And yes, it did cause problem. I'm banned in a number of countries. For the longest time, you couldn't go to a party in Lebanon without them making fun of me. And I loved that. You know, for somebody who doesn't leave the house, having people talk about me is a lot of fun. But, you know, yes, it was difficult for my mother and father and stuff like that. And when my father was still alive at the time, and he was so proud of me for you know, writing this book. And he comes up to me and says that he's so proud and he's so happy, but unfortunately he wasn't able to read past the first 10 pages because his English is not that good. On page 11, the young boy gets fucked in the garage down, you know, and he's like 11 years old. So he stopped right before that, which I always thought was sweet. Anything else? Please.
So my family, my father's side is from Jordan.
I was born there.
Yeah. So they're not particularly religious, but they still have some anti-gay sentiment. So I was wondering, with your experience, you know, growing up in Lebanese, do you think there's more of a cultural or religious side to the anti-gay sentiment within that region?
You know, sorry, did you all hear that? Should I repeat? His father is originally from Jordan. They're not very religious, but he believes that they have anti-gay sentiments. And do I think that that comes from religion, experience, or more sort of social stuff? And the truth is, my first reaction is always, why differentiate? You know, they have, it's like they have these feelings which are incorrect, and where they came from is of little interest to me. I know it might be more of interest to you, but since I am a non-believer, I don't care what your religious beliefs are. You know, they're not mine. But it's difficult to talk to parents about it. But you know what I have found, and my experience might not be everybody's, of course, is that it doesn't matter how anti-gay parents are. If your kid is gay, any good parent will change their view in a second. Okay, now, I mean, this is the beauty of growing up in a culture like Jordan or Lebanon. I was never, ever, ever, ever worried about my parents kicking me out or disowning me in that sense, because that would look bad on them. I knew without a doubt that my father loved me more than anything. It killed him for the longest time that I wouldn't get married and stuff. I thought maybe they could lock me in a room and never let me out, but they could never, ever, ever, ever let go of me. And that is part of our culture as well. I have never been able to let go of them. I'm still as close to my mom and my two sisters, which is why I live here and they live in Beirut. Because when we get together, it's one person. So yes, there are, like everywhere, there are a lot of anti-gay sentiments, but I guarantee you, I've seen it in Lebanon all the time. And probably the reason that, there are so many out gay men of the younger generation in Lebanon, and lesbians, and particularly the lesbians, because they refused to get married, so they had to come out, is that all of a sudden, parents had their kids who were gay. So it's not something happening out there. Yes?
The piece that you sent to us was a beautiful piece about love. Do you think that someone can write a novel, anything about love, without having been in love with someone?
I have never been in love with someone. I've hated a lot of people. I've been in long-term relationships with them and wanted to kill them. Love? No, I'm not sure. Of course you can. You can write about anything. I mean, I want to say up to a point. You can appropriate, because everybody's talking about cultural appropriation. You can appropriate so many things and do it well. There's good writing and bad writing. But no, I mean, again, like the relationship that he has, the narrator has, I've never had. I've dated, I've had long-term relationships, but I've never lived with my lovers. I wouldn't want to. God, I'd give up closet space, forget that. But it is, relationships come in many forms and sizes. Did I love people? I loved many, 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 many people. Some at the same time. But yes, you can write about it. I think so. I don't think you can be, I always say I hate people, I hate people, I hate people. Because, by the way, I am no longer gay. I transcended queer and gay. I'm creating a new political and sexual identity. I am grumpy. So I hate everything. But you can't really write without having some sort of connection to things. But you also can't be completely involved. Like one of the secrets is you can't write about your family if you're still living with them, because you're too involved. And if you're too distant, you can't write about them either. You can't write about what you're involved in. There has to be a certain distance. I call it, you're 1 foot in and 1 foot out. Anything else? Please.
You said that you had to come out to your dad 3 times because he forgot. Do you have any advice for someone who has tried to come out to parents, but they forget or just don't want to believe?
I can't. I can give you some advice, but I really can't. But by the 3rd time with my father, I decided this is what he wants. He knows I am. We're not kidding each other. But he wants some form of way to be able to deny that someday I will get married and have kids. And here I am, just there is no way. But he wanted that, and at the same time, you can't take that away from them. You have to find the balance within you as to what is it that you have to come out for, and to be true to yourself, But God, I mean, I love my parents. I love my father. I would never want to hurt him either. But again, so it's this balance, because being in the closet, I think, is so hurtful to the parent. I mean, the worst thing I've ever done sort of in my life, do I have regrets? Honey, let me tell you. I have a sister who's 2 years younger. I just assumed that I had come out to her. Didn't. So about 6 or 7 years ago, I mean, everybody knows. I mean, I'm not talking, it's like I'm probably 20-something years ago, I was probably the out person in Lebanon. I don't know if anybody else was. So everybody knows I'm gay. Except my sister. She knew, but I had never told her. The hurt that I had told everybody. Then I went public with my books. Then I told my little sister, but not her, was so damaging. And I had no idea. I just assumed, like everybody, that I came out. It's a personal thing that's important. And I seriously think that you're hurting the people that you don't come out to, even if they end up disowning you. It's a more honest relationship than this. But then again, as to how much, like how many times and how do you tell them, I don't know. I mean, the first time I was maybe 23, and this was 2 years ago. My father, straight out, he comes and goes, "Are you gay?" And at those times, very few people. I said, well, if people who sleep only with men are on here, and if people who sleep only with women are over here, I'm somewhere here. He didn't get that. Okay. He did not get that. It took him another 2 years to ask again. Because again, he just didn't want to. And it's fine. Again, I thought, like I said, I had come out as much as I could to him. And that's what he wanted. Anything else? Please.
What was your relationship with your mom? Was it similar or different to your
No, my relationship with my mom was very different. I mean, they've been married forever and ever and ever, and they're very close. But always, my father was incapable of, for the longest time, incapable of being too close. He was a man. Whereas my mom and I were very close. And when I had to really come out at about 24, 25, it was her I went to first. And it caused all kinds of anguish and so on. But we're still close to this day. When I go back to Beirut, even though I have my own place, I stay with her. We travel together. The trouble is getting her to go somewhere without my other 2 sisters and their kids. But yeah. And one of the funniest things, though, is that, like I said, I come out, but it's hard to explain that you constantly have to do it, and how much you hide, and what's the balance of. About 10 years ago, my mom said, I have never met any of your boyfriends. And it was like, okay, next time. More than one, okay? But then I realized that I was not consciously doing it, but I was not, being completely who I am around her. And again, it hurt her.
We have time for one more question.
Yes, my shoes are fabulous. Please.
Are you religious? And if you are, how do you find middle ground between your religion and your sexuality?
I was very, very lucky that I am not religious. I was born into probably the ideal religion for someone like me. We are what is called Druze. We are a minority religion, maybe about 300,000 in the entire world. The name in Arabic is also Al-Muwahhidun, which is the Unitarians. They tried to unify the religion, and like all religions that tried to unify, they ended up being hated by everybody. But what is important is that we don't believe that anything can come between you and God. Nothing can come between the relationship between you and God. So that we don't have priests, we don't have clerics, we don't have churches. Every place is God's place. But most important, we think that children are too young to be taught religion. That you can talk about God, but the actual understanding of what God means must be at a mature age, somewhere around 40. So that for someone like me, I was never indoctrinated. I studied the Quran, I studied the Bible because that's what school told us, but my parents were not that. So I grew up as not very religious, and then I got smart.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.